So without any further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Martin Benavides, who is the director of IAP.
Welcome to this second IAP series of strategic debates, and the first that has been organized as part of the learning series of the SDG 4 Education 2030 High-Level Steering Committee. IAP is pleased to organize this event in collaboration with the UNESCO Education Policy Section and OECD Directorate for Education and Skills. In particular, we are pleased to have with us today Kwan Chol Chan, who is Chief of the Education Policy Section, Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning System at UNESCO, and who will give more information about the work of the Global Education Cooperation Mechanism at the end of the session. This learning series is designed as peer learning webinars aiming to address knowledge policymakers, practitioners, and researchers to discuss their experiences. Those webinars are structured around key stages of the policy cycle, with each session zooming into evidence, use, and uptake in a distinct phase. For our debate today, we have decided to focus on the important topics of the use of evidence in a situational analysis to move policy forward. As you know, a situational analysis is the factor key to better understand the conditions and context to support the design and implementation of educational policies. For example, when a country pinpoints foundational literacy as a key priority, a situational analysis should entail assessing the current state of literacy teaching methods, educational resources, and existing barriers by mapping, collecting, and analyzing evidence such as large-scale national assessment data, information about teacher training and qualifications, result of research studies, and stakeholder perspective, including those of teachers, youth, and marginalized populations. But what are the challenges met in this process, and how to make sure that it leads to better policies and create a more conducive environment for their implementation? In this context, this debate will delve into strategies for using evidence in a situational analysis to move policies forward, building on concrete examples from IAP and OECD work that will be complemented by the perspective of Gambia. Among the critical issues to be addressed, I can mention the following. First, how to make the link between data production, data analysis, and policy development. How to ensure the data collected is relevant for policymakers, and how to ensure that different sources of data can be integrated into the analysis to ensure that major sources of information are not excluded. And third, what skills and capacities are needed at the national level to ensure the update and use of data in a situational analysis. To discuss these important issues, we are very fortunate to hear from three specialists working on the collection and use of data for situational analysis in very different contexts, and who will dive in their presentations into concrete country experiences. First, we have Diane Curry, who is an education program specialist within the IAP Technical Cooperation Team at the IAP. She supports member states, in particular, in strategic plan preparation, monitoring, and evaluation. We will have also Sumaya McNuh, who is a policy analysis at the OECD Directorate for Education and Skills, where she has been working since 2015. She currently leads the peace analysis and reporting partnership, which supports country preparation in PISA to develop national capacity for peace analysis and reporting. And finally, as a speaker, we will have Alpha Bab, who is the head of EMIS and ICT units under the Planning, Policy Analysis and Budgeting Directorate of the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education at Gambia. Alpha is also one of the ECOWAS EMIS experts and has taken a leadership role in crafting the EMIS norms and standards and conducting EMIS peer reviews. Each speaker will have 8 minutes to give their presentation, which will be followed by a short roundtable. Then we will have the participation, an online participation with questions that you can send to the chat. And finally, we will have our colleague, Kwan Chol Chan from UNESCO section of Education Policy to share with you more information about activities developed as part of the Evidence and Policy Technical Committee. So without further ado, I will now over to my colleagues, to Diane first, and then to Muriel for doing the moderation of this strategic debate. Thank you. So over to you, Diane.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Martin. So let me just share my screen. So can you see? I think I have to do this.
Yes.
Can you see?
Yes.
It works? Okay, fantastic. So thanks a lot, Martin, for introducing the work. So my presentation will tackle on education sector analysis, and with a focus on the source of data and the challenges related to it. So for those who are not familiar with an ESA or education sector analysis, it is a kind of it is a comprehensive diagnosis of the education sector, of the whole education sector, starting with ECE up to higher education, including TVET and non-formal education, and of course basic and secondary education, which really try to assess the progresses and achievement made by the system, and usually over a decade period. It looks at efficiency. It looks at the analysis takes what we say an efficiency angle. It looks at how the system is transforming the different education inputs into different outcome related to school coverage, quality, equity, as well as external efficiency, which is the relationship with the labor market. It really helps to identify the education's major strengths and weaknesses, to assess pockets on efficiencies, as well as the constraints affecting the education system. And also it tried to already find some orientation on how to kind of overcome those constraints that have been identified. So as Martin initially mentioned, it's really a very important tools we are using to help policymakers, to help the dialogue when we have to decide on which policy a ministry should focus on in order to alleviate a series of challenges or a specific challenge. So they are our major tool we are using especially we develop education sector plan. ESA is really the way we do it is really about the approach it takes is what we say it's evidence based. We really try to, as much as possible, rely on a series of data, whether they're quantitative or qualitative, in order to remain to make the work factual and at the same time neutral. You understand that if we do work with data, what would be important is to make sure that we do get reliable data. And getting reliable data is all the more important if we want indeed to come up with analysis that is neutral, but also robust. The more robust the analysis is, the more we will have a good understanding of how the education system is performing, how the education system is working, and really to adequately identify the strengths and weaknesses. Having strong foundation is what will help us later on when we will design the key strategies and the key objectives that the policy or the plan should take on. And as well, it will provide robust foundation, solid foundation or baseline for subsequent analysis or monitoring or evaluation of the policy of the plan. When we do an ESA, a lot of people think it's all about AMIS, but it's not all about AMIS. When we do an ESA is covered a lot of topics ranging from schooling, as I said, schooling pattern, quality, and in terms of quality, we hear about level of learning of children, but not only, we are looking at the school environment, we are looking also at issues related to governance, we are looking at issues related to financing, how also students do perform in the labor market. So we do rely on a very different type of data. We rely on macro data, on population data on school performance, on budget data, on data related to personnel and their related salaries, as I said, learning achievement data, but we also use household surveys to complement existing more routine and administrative data. And as far as the labor market analysis is concerned, we do rely on employment data. You can see here on this slide, a lot of sources are being used for each of those type of data. For instance, when we assess the macro framework, we will use data from the National Bureau of Statistics. We will also draw data from the Ministry of Finance and as well from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. For population data, usually we try to use a population projection from censuses, but not only. In many cases, we also rely on household survey data and UN population. For schooling performance, most of the time we will rely on AMIS or the school census, but in sometimes as well we will rely on our household survey to complement certain analysis. For instance, when you want to look at certain, for instance, participation but level of wealth, it's something that you will use not the AMIS information that cannot capture that type of information, but you will use household survey data. For the budget, usually we rely on budget voted and disbursed from the Ministry of Finance. We also rely in some cases from the management information system or the financing management information system. We can rely on midterm expenditure framework as well as public expenditure review. For personal, usually we will be looking at HR miss, but as well we will take information from the AMIS as well from the payroll, and the payroll will also help us assess the level of salaries of teacher and non-teaching staff. And we try also to get, when feasible, payment records from non-civil servants, because those records are not available in the payroll, which is only dealing with civil servant. For learning assessment, we are usually looking and analyzing results from national exams. But you will see that we also, when existing, we are relying whether on national, regional, or international learning assessment survey. And you have our colleague from OECD who is going to present you the work they do on PISA. And it is the type of data we are also mobilizing when they exist. And as I mentioned, we are relying a lot on household survey data to better understand also the learning environment at home, but also in some cases, it helps us to grasp information related to funding by families on education. And for employment data, we use TRISO surveys, labor market surveys, as well as employment data from employment agencies. So you see, we are using a lot of data. They are very kind of different type of data. And one issue we see, so they are coming from a lot of different sources. And what we see in the countries we have been working with is that most of the time they're not centralized. So data are scattered across different departments within the Ministry of Education or within different ministries, especially, for instance, you will need to get data with the Ministry of Labor, sometimes to get information on TVET. You will need also to reach out to the Ministry of Welfare or Family, sometimes to get access to data on EC when this subsector is also being handled by this type of ministry. So it's scattered. So it makes really, you can imagine all the data we have scattered throughout the different department, agencies, and ministries. It takes a lot of time to collect those different data. This is really something we need to consider, and getting access to those data is not always very easy. Another major issue we are seeing is that those data are not integrated. And what we see sometimes, when we see integrated, we are talking about data which are a little bit similar. For instance, you have, let's take an example of HR. You have HR data with the AMIS, those related to teaching and non-teaching staff at school level. You have also HR data at the payroll level, those who are paid by the Ministry of Finance. And then you have the data from the public service which also will have a nominal role of number of teachers with certain characteristics. What we see is that those different data do not talk to each other, and we end up to have similar information presented in different kind of format with different level of information and disaggregation, and they do not talk to each other. We have contradictory figures. So that's one issue we are facing. Another issue, bulk of issue we are saying relates to quality. In some instances, we are working with data sets that are not comprehensive. For instance, you will find in certain countries where the school census, for instance, is not covering properly ECD or ECE or KG. It's not properly covering early childhood education or not properly covering non-formal education. In some cases also, it's not covering private schools because there is sometimes it's not compulsory for private schools to report. So you end up to be working with a set of information that is not comprehensive. In some other cases, you are working with data that are inaccurate. For instance, when we work with population data, population projection are based on census, and the more, the longer the census have been conducted, the less accurate your data are, and they become all the more inaccurate that you have movement of population within the country, or even when you have heavy brain drain, that can happen in certain areas. So you see that this makes the computation of schooling indicator that heavily rely on enrollment on population data more or less inaccurate.
You have 30 seconds left, Diane.
No, okay, I will be quick. So there are also issue of timing when sometimes, timing issue for school census, they're producing results too late. And also we have issue related to format, not always very user-friendly, and another issue of accessibility. So this to say, we are facing a lot of challenges. So what we have to do in order to ensure this robustness, we are doing a lot of quality assurance check, trying to use as many type of information that are available to us, triangulate them, cleaning them, and correct them eventually to ensure robustness and credibility. I will just finish with this note saying we are using a different series of guidelines we have been developing throughout the years with a lot of colleagues from UNESCO, from the World Bank, UNICEF, GPE, FCDO. Those guidelines, we have relied heavily on them, and we are trying to little by little update them to include more comprehensive new topics. Thank you. I'm good. I'm done.
Thanks a lot, Diane, for sharing the experience of IP with ESAs. And now we're going to dive in the experience of the colleagues from the OECD and from PISA on the same topic. Over to you, Soumaya.
Thank you very much, Muriel. Just give me a second as I try to share my screen.
Soumaya, could you change the display so that?
All right. Hopefully now it appears correctly. It was very interesting to hear Diane's presentation and on the ESA, and I just wanted to share with the audience today zooming into a very specific experience of one type of data, which is the evidence from PISA and how countries participating in the PISA survey are mobilizing the evidence to inform education policy and the challenges that they face in that. So for those that maybe not be familiar with PISA, PISA stands for the Program for International Student Assessment. It is a large-scale assessment of student performance. It assesses students at the end of basic education at 15 years old. So usually the model grade 7 or 8 in math, reading, science, and then each cycle would have an innovative domain, such as in the last cycle that we just published in December, it was creative thinking. In addition to the PISA test that a sample of 15 years old would take, we also collect through background questionnaires information about the student's background, the student's well-being, the learning strategies that they use in their learning, whether their teacher use, their motivation to learning and future careers, as well as through a school questionnaire, information about school level policies, practices, the school resources, and as well as the education system, more institutional factors. And all this information from the questionnaires and the tests are triangulated through an analysis to get a sense of what is the state of education in the countries that are participating. PISA is today one of the biggest large-scale assessments in the world, with 81 countries that participated in the latest edition, which was published in December, and the different volumes are still being released. And so why countries or economies decide to join PISA, and how do they use the PISA evidence? I would say there's two main objectives. The first is one of monitoring and tracking. PISA provides countries with information to monitor and track the performance of their education system over time. It provides longitudinal data. It is stable and it's cyclical, every 3 years, now every 4 years. And it also allows you to monitor the performance of your education system vis-a-vis other participating countries and economies. So it also gives you benchmarks and an international or regional lens on your education system. It also provides you with an understanding on what are the type of relationships that we find between some of policy decisions or policy choices and learning outcomes. So for instance, over time, PISA has shown that students that are repeating at least a grade have lower levels of learning outcomes, or for instance, that education systems that have early streaming into educational paths would tend to have lower learning outcomes than others that track later or that have a more modular levels of tracking. So these two objectives combined of both monitoring and tracking, but also looking at the evidence from the data, the objective is that countries use it to inform their education policy debate and have an evidence-based education policy debate and reform planning. However, there are different challenges that we have observed in countries that are either new to PISA or that don't have already a culture of mobilizing this very specific type of data, which is micro level, large scale, and based on student surveys, as part of their education planning or situation analysis studies. And we can look at it in two ways, both from the data analysis, and I will not touch a lot on this because we may go back to it later, but also from the demand side, from the policymakers, from those that should be on the receiving end of the data. And often there's a disconnect. The reports are there, they're produced, but they're not used by the policymakers. There is a disconnect between what the data say and then what the reforms say on curriculum or on school resources will end up going towards. There is also sometimes a disconnect in terms where the data is not answering the key priority questions that the country has at end. And what we see is, as often the answer for this is actually looking at knowledge mobilization as a loop rather than linear relationships. So in countries where this relationship work, often the policymakers are participating, are involved from the get-go. So they are involved from the design stage. To give you an example, if you want to know how your students perform, like say in a minority language compared to students that are studying in a national language, this is a design question that needs to be taken into account at the design stage. If it's not taken account, then the data will not be able to answer your question. So making sure that your policy priorities are taken account from the start means mobilizing the policymakers from the start. It's also a way of educating the policymakers in terms of how to use the data in their policy processes. And it's also about making sure that that education make the policymakers also go beyond the league table and the ranking into looking at other aspects and more of the richness of the database. And at the OECD, so just very quickly, and I'll end on that, we are supporting newcomers into PISA and middle-income countries mostly to build that ecosystem through three main components of activities, through capacity development, mostly for the data analyst, through knowledge mobilization and dissemination. So again, creating that continuum and that between the policymakers, the parents, the students, the teachers, and your data analysts, and as well on a reporting end. And just to give you an example, so for the training, we are providing a hybrid training model, including an online training as well as a residency at the OECD for data analysts. We are supporting countries to develop their national reports on PISA data that are contextualized and also mobilizing other national data and that are reviewed and by OECD analysts. And then we're also helping them develop a knowledge mobilization strategy from the start to the culmination of the launch of their national reports. So these are just two examples from the recent launches in Ukraine and Mongolia in December. And I will stop here for now. Thank you very much. And over to you, Muriel.
Thanks a lot, Soumaya, and thanks a lot also for ending up your presentation with those concrete examples on how to build capacities also in the use of situational analysis. And on this basis, now we are going to turn over to Alphaba, who is going to share the experience of Gambia and also share some examples with you of concrete examples of use of the data collected through those situational analysis, including at local level. Over to you, Alpha.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you very much. Okay, my name is Alphaba from the Ministry of Education, the Gambia. We are very happy to be part of this debate, sharing our experience. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, it is already easy for me because Diane in your presentation mentioned most of the issues, some of the challenges that we are faced, but in the context of the Gambia, there is one thing that is very important, which is the common analogy of which is the chicken and the egg. You have good data for better policies and better policies based on good data. So you don't know which one is more important because in the case of the Gambia, as you could see from 1998, the role of the education policy, because the education policy have made some emphasis on ensuring there is some kind of data collection, data processing. And that is because of that pronouncement in that policy, some effort were done in terms of making data is available in the Gambia. The subsequent policies continue to strengthen the role of data and the capacity of data, as you could see in this slide, from the role, the definition of or the policy pronouncement on education management information system across the policies over the years has been changing from collecting education data, finance data to effective tool for using image as an effective tool to rationalize planning. The other policy we're talking about now is improving it to measure, to ensure M&E. And recently, during the 2016-2030 policy, we are talking about making sure that information on IMIS are supporting knowledge base and informing knowledge management across the national and regional level. So this is one of the things that really drive data systems in the country, because we cannot have IMIS system without having right policy objective that are overarching above. Next slide. Is it slow? Okay. Now, in the context of this webinar, we are talking about how do we use data to inform situational analysis and to inform policy directives. Now, as you could see, in the wake of education for all, leaving no one behind, and making sure that is government investment and towards education, school improvement grants. Just like every school was receiving grants from government. And these grants were tied based on the unit cost of the child based on the child. So it's like every child will be given an amount for the school improvement grant. So in the Gambia, for example, we had a situation where these monies were sent to the head teachers and the school management committee accounts, which means they are responsible for monitoring it. But then how do we make sure that first, the number of students will give you the total amount you get? But then how do we make sure that we link it to policy and decision making? We said 40% is based on the number of people for the first term. Then the second term, we will make sure that the enrollment data would have been collected by that time, because we collect data every November. So the second term, before SIG is paid, we will make sure verify that if there is a proportion paid to that. And then by the time the SIG is paid, school improvement grant is paid to school, the enrollment, the proportion will be paid based on the number of students that have attended the national assessment test. Because in the Gambia, we are lucky that national assessment tests happen in all schools. So it's not a sample. So therefore, we would say that if you had all the children that you enroll in September, we need to make sure that, and then the SIG was paid based on that. We need to make sure that by the time we pay the final payment of the SIG, would be based on the number of children who sat to the exam. So if you have GOS data, if you have GOS enrollment, this is where we can qualify, we can verify. So it was a very good quality check that helped us. So it was like linking to that. And then again, the school improvement plan was based on the investment on the school improvement grant. So these are some of the other things that was very useful at the school management. So it helped us triangulate and check and balance the system. But then there are other data, like Diane was saying, we need to collect. We have to have data that is coming from higher education sector, because they are having the teacher training college and the University of the Gambia. But what is the teacher training content like, and CPD? It has to be around that. So we have to also work with Minister of Finance, like Diane said, to get the budget and finance data to ensure that we can calculate, we can produce brief in terms of investment in education expenditure, so that we can calculate finance brief and the like. And then we also depend on population data from the Bureau of Statistics. The Bureau of Statistics has to give us data that is going to help the secondary data for calculating gross enrollment ratio and other indicators. We have exams cancelled for the West African region. All our national assessment data and our West African exam data come from that. So we have to make sure that we work together and ensure that this data is making sense and is the same as the number of the school codes in the WAEC exam, and the school code we have in our system is the same. Now we are looking at how do you link birth certificates and nutritional and vaccine data from the Ministry of Health. That's also another way we are linking the linkage of data with the Ministry of Education. Next slide. So now here is an example where we are using evidence again, like for example, based on the data we collect, integrating with finance, integrating with higher education, integrating with assessment and examination, we are able to conduct what we call ESA. That's an example of 2010. And since then, we have conducted a series of ESA. But again, it was this evidence that was informing key steps that have been transforming the education in terms of access. So you could see, for example, it was because of the ESA and the PER and those kind of evidence that we are reporting. That is what policymakers in the Gambia use to make sure that they are able to introduce school improvement grant and how it was staggered across over the years. And then recently we had a PER and another ESA collected that says that we have to focus, we have to orient the process education service delivery towards open schooling, to this decentralized calendar across the region. Instead of having one blanket day of opening schools in the Gambia, we have to decentralize the factor local needs and community needs. And then we have to make emphasis on early childhood education because of the PER also. Because the early childhood education predominantly was based on the private sector, but now government is beginning to invest in it now that GR of the gross enrollment ratio has gone up. And then now we are focusing on foundational learning. So the kind of data we collect, integrating with linking it with all the data, and then writing evidence-based report, the sector the management of the education system is able to orientations and focus towards addressing the challenges as we see. Next slide. Sure. Now, the other thing is school mapping. You cannot do school mapping without having geospatial data. You cannot do school mapping without having population data. And then to build schools is very expensive to establish a school without having the right population, having the right intake. So it was one of the biggest challenge of investment in education, where you might build a school and eventually the enrollment are not there. So we used the map to really map us and tell us where to build school, what are the priorities. Next slide. I think the next slide should be talking about the school report card. It's a bit slow. Now we have what we call a school report card. This is something we inherited or got development partner support from UNICEF and maybe World Bank. And what we do, we have a report card that provides the outcome or the deliverables of the schools as a school management committee, where they can sit and look at the metrics and look at what they were given in terms of resources and how much they have produced vis-a-vis the cluster, the region, the district. So the school management committee is able to use that. That is also, is a lot of integration of data, including poverty data and poverty index and socioeconomic data as part of it. So that's another way we are using in the Gambia, which is a very good practice that we are sharing data back to the actors who are really on the ground. Next slide. And I think that's the last slide. This is about the community scorecard. In addition to the school report card that is targeted for the school management committee, we have another report card provided particularly for the parent-teacher associations. In this slide, we are showing how the community comes and are engaging the school management to ensure that they understand what the school is doing, how much have they been given in terms of resources, what have they done with the resources, and the outcome of the school in a graphic pictorial manner, so that the lay person, depending on their language and their understanding, can understand what will happening. So this is another form of empowering the community to be able to engage the school management committee so that they can play a role because in the Gambia, as part of our school management committee, a school management manual, the PTA is a subcommittee that is responsible for monitoring the school management. So this is another feedback we give to the parent and the community so that they can now see how their school is doing, vis-a-vis the region, vis-a-vis the cluster, vis-a-vis the district, so that they can start to understand and participate in the education service delivery at their community. I think that's the end of my slide.
Yes, thank you so much, Alpha. Thanks a lot for this presentation. So thanks to our three panelists. So we are now going to move on with two roundtable discussion with all of our panelists. And at the same time, we are looking at the chat where we have received quite a number of questions. And so we will try to address all of those questions just afterwards. So please do not hesitate to keep on posting your messages and contributions in the chat. So to our three panelists, so in all of your presentations, you have shown the diversity of sources of information that needs to be collected in order to try to get really an accurate picture of the situation. And so our first questions would be related to the integration of data and how, from your experience, is it possible to facilitate the integration of data coming from very different sources? Maybe starting with Diane.
So thank you very much, Maria. So thanks for these very important questions. Indeed, that is one of the major issues, to what extent can different data sources can be better integrated in order also to ease the data collection, to ensure also consistency throughout the different data sources and for more effectiveness at the end of the day. So we are seeing in some countries approaches to further integrate different data sets. For instance, In certain countries that are developing also HR miss, there is some kind of strong. I mean, they're trying to make the link with the teacher part of the EMIS. So trying to link up the EMIS questionnaire related to teaching and non-teaching stuff with the one on the public service. So there is, and the idea here is to somehow align the interface, to have those interfaces talking to each other, the interface of the EMIS with the interface of the HR. Also, what we are seeing is in more developed and in more, I would say, complex HR miss system, the integration of certain. So again, the HR data with the payroll. So there are linkages that are made between EMIS, payroll, HR, in order to better assess, what is the actual number of teachers. This is very important throughout the different ministries. And also, when you link up those different databases, and especially the one on HR with the payroll, you are able also to better estimate what will be your needs in terms of wage bill in the years to come. You are able to better kind of anticipate and to better understand how your HR will evolve in terms of career advancement, in terms also of attrition. And by better attaching that to the payroll, you are better able to assess also the different financial needs. So we are seeing efforts in better integrating the different data sets, but there are many challenges. We are talking about different ministries. We already know that coordination within a ministry is already difficult. So imagine when you have to coordinate with a different ministry. But I think it's we are seeing that. I mean, countries who are moving toward that, who are moving towards digitalization of the administration, are moving towards this type of approaches for more integration. I think everyone see the added value of that, and I think Alpha will be able to really, show what they have been doing in the Gambia because they are moving towards that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diane. So maybe we can go straight to Alpha first to react from the Gambian perspective, and then and Sumaya. So over to you, Alpha.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dan. I think that's very clear. You are right. One of the biggest challenges we have, first in the EMIS space, was around the kind of capacity that is needed to ensure that you are able to carry on providing the data that is required by your education policy and by your users. One of the challenges is EMIS has not been funded by the national government. You might realize that EMIS has a challenge of getting the right budget, the right devices, the right capacity. So we are almost dependent on development partner support. Without development partner support, most of the EMIS around, including Gambia, would not have reached or cannot even collect data. So this is one of the challenges we have. So the enabling and supportive environment and the leadership is there, but in theory, but practically, to be honest with you, when you looked at our budget investment in education, all the money goes to teacher salaries or staff salaries. There is little limit left for development, and then the little money left is competing with other priorities that are more political. So, and that's one of the problems we have, and that has been there for a very long time. And then by the time while that problem is still there, we are now beginning to have this biggest problem. Everybody is asking us data, particularly new data. The advent of COVID, we've learned so much that we've been collecting data. That data, when COVID hit, we had a problem of what are you going to do for remote learning? What are you going to do for other things? The data we had was not useful for that. We needed to get data that is from the household, and we don't collect data from household. We needed data that tell us what is the socioeconomic situation. We couldn't have that data. We cannot even have data. We don't know what the homes have. How many TVs, how many radios, how many users of mobile phone are there. So the data we had at EMIS during COVID could not be used to inform COVID policy priorities. So as a result, you are depending on very other data, secondary data like household survey data, which is available periodically and usually is not up to date. So this is one of the problems. Then post-COVID, we have a bigger challenge of learning. Everybody is saying there is learning poverty, there is learning data, there is teacher training. Now we are beginning to have new policies by 2016 to 2030. We are now in midterm after the TES, the Education Summit. Every minister is forced to come up with a new reform strategy. The reform strategy has key points. This point are talking about Tibet as skill, foundational literacy and foundational numeracy, and then investment in education. The data system we have is not around that. The ecosystem around the data is looking at other things. So how do we measure learning? That's a big question mark. And then we need to ensure that how do we ensure foundation learning is there? We have not. Our email system is not 100% ready. So there's a lot of reform that need to be done with the data. While the reform agenda is taking a political pace, it has not cascaded to a point where at the data, including our instrument, data collection we need, the data collection that is needed at the school level. For example, before you can collect data, the school must be ready to make sure that the data is already packed somewhere. The data is in their registers, is in their processes, is in their transaction. Then image people can come and harvest on that data. But now the kind of data we are being asked is brand new, is emerging. It's not only brand new and emerging. We are asked to report more often, more than annual. We are now asked to report daily. We are asked to report more than what we used to report. And yet there has not been that commensurate response towards capacity that is built in the system. So these are the problems we have. Now the integration challenge is there. So these are some of the things that image system in the Gambia we have faced, although we have very good partners because we have been working with the GPE and World Bank, and recently we have had very important inroads with University of Oslo as part of the KICS initiative. And then we are now trying to shift from aggregate to individual to ensure that we can now move from granular level and closer instead of centralized to decentralized at school level, and then trying to see how best we can now measure learning, including equity and inclusion system. So we are working very slow and slowly, but if that motivation is not part of all the processes from top to bottom, it is very unlikely it's sustainable. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Alpha. And thanks also for ending on this note that it should be not only a top-down, but also opened-up process if we are really putting this question of use of evidence on the scene. Still on this topic of integration of data, Sumaya, I don't know from the perspective of PISA, if it makes sense as a question. Are you using different sources of data or basically using what you collect through the PISA process in one go in a way? Or are you facing also this particular challenge of data integration?
I will look at it in a different way, not so much from the PISA side, but from the country side that are using PISA as part of their question of wanting to monitor learning outcomes. And here I would say that even when we look at the question just of foundational learning, one data source might not be enough. And hopefully that answers some of the questions that were in the chat is, from a country's perspective, there is a need to integrate different data sources and asking yourself different question on how you integrate that. And for that, for the learning, for foundational learning, what we recommend often to countries is you need to have a clear student assessment framework. You need to ask yourself, what are the purpose of this data source? What information does it collect? What are other information that needs to be complemented? So for instance, PISA gives you information at the end of basic education. So it gives you an information at the age of 15, what have been the education experience of students that have finished basic education. It would not give you information or more timely information about the experience in early grades of education. So if you're trying to understand what is the learning readiness, for instance, of students, or what is their experience in early grade reading. That information is not, the PISA is not going to give you that information. So you need to be able to look at what are the different questions that are important, what are the key milestones in learning, and what are the different data sources that we have. So and it's also about looking at the different purposes. So PISA gives you an international comparative benchmark. And that is very valuable if you're trying to review your education system vis-a-vis a bigger standing. But it's not going to give you information about your own curriculum or within, and it's not going to give you as contextualized information as a national assessment. So it is within setting up a assessment framework. What we see that countries do is they try to think about the different milestones, the different perspective and lenses, and the different end use that you have of the data. Another one is, do you want to give feedback to the schools? In such a case, if you're trying to give formative information that will influence directly learning in a classroom, that also has an impact of what data you collect. Sample-based assessments such as PISA, I saw mention of EGRA, EGMA, or regional assessments such as CPLM are not enough for that. It will give you information at the system level, but not at the school level. And for that, you need something that is more census-based, where you're assessing all your schools, or you can even go at all your students. So it's really those type of questions that countries go through when they develop an assessment framework. And if people are curious to see how maybe some OECD countries do it, I recommend looking, for instance, at the example of France, an example that the DEP in the Ministry of Education has developed, where they have integrated different international assessments, so PISA, TIMSS, PEARLS, but also national assessments. So they do diagnostic assessments at different key milestones of basic education. And so that is all part of their framework. Or you could look also at the example of, for instance, Indonesia in Southeast Asia, which participates in PISA, but also has information from a robust national assessment that gives census-based information. So just to say that even within this very specific area of learning outcome, you need that integration to be able to really have sufficient evidence to inform policy.
Thanks a lot, Soumaya. We receive a lot of comments in the chat. Many people are asking about, okay, so we have all of those sources of information, this wide range of data, but really how people are making use of it. And so we will get back to this with specific questions maybe just after that. But before that, just a final question from myself to the panelists related to the skills and knowledge needed to facilitate the use of data and evidence in situational analysis as a way to bring us further to this issue of really what kind of use is made of all of these big sets of information, evidence, and data, and how to facilitate this process, possibly with some good examples of impact. So maybe we can restart with you, Diane, on this topic.
Yes, thank you. So about the capacity development needs to make the use of those data. So as it was already, I think some people touched upon it, there are different needs at different levels. So I think it will be important that to understand what are the needs, for instance, at school level, what are the needs at district level, what are the needs at a national level. So according to, we need to properly define those needs in order to also kind of align the type of support that would be needed. And I think Alpha touched base on it. First, it's about what type of infrastructure do we have in place in terms of to support data collection, to support data analysis, to support the reporting. So already having a robust system to be able to collect data at the different level, to be able to properly analyze those data at different level and report with the right level of information. Again, what we are seeing is a lot of data have been collected, have been reported, but they're not very useful for policymakers, or they might not always be useful for the school leaders. So I think having a good understanding of the needs at the different levels will already help to shape the type of support that will be required. So there is the infrastructure, and it's true that there is concrete capacity development needs in terms of filling a questionnaire, do the quality assurance of those questionnaires, analyzing those questionnaires. So this will require certain more technical skills in terms of maybe Excel, maybe more complex in terms of more statistical software to make sense of the data. For instance, for PISA, I'm sure you're using quite complex software to be able to draw the analysis. So it's true that having those strong skills will be very important to make sense of the data and be able to properly share them, but again, to also be able to adapt it to the audience. And I think that's something that was said, what we are not doing enough is what we call those feedback loop back to the school. For instance, what we see a lot of school head when they have to fill the school census questionnaires, not being, they fill them and they never see the data for their school. And I think one way to enhance this feedback loop is what the Gambia is doing, for instance, with those school report card and those community report card. They are very important and very interesting initiatives to really make sure that you display data in a way that even somebody who is illiterate can make sense of them. So you see that the level of skills you need to develop can be very complex with high statistics. At the same time, it's just from the other angle, it can be how to make use through a very user-friendly way to present data and to make sure, and to help the community, the PTA, to engage in the discussion. Unless you have that, you will not, the data will make sense for people at the top, but indeed those at the bottom, you won't see the results, and it will not that easily trickle down. So different layers, different needs. And at the end of the day, I think it's how to create this culture of kind of data monitoring and accountability. And the more we will work at grassroots levels, the more we will be able to change, this by strengthening the local approach to ask for more. And I think I will just give an example. I'm not going to cite the country, but I supported an ESA a long time ago. And you had the country has done an EGRA, so it's an early graduating assessment, and the data was super poor. You could see that, for instance, after 2-3 years of schooling, half of the kids could not even mention the 20 letters of the alphabet after 3 years of schooling. At the same time, there were a satisfaction survey conducted to parents saying, are you happy with the school? And 80% say, yes, the school is fantastic. My child is learning. So you see, on one hand, parents do not understand that their kids do not learn anything at school. So unless you really push for parents to be more involved, and to start really to help them engage with very easy way. And again, the school report card at community level is a very important tool to bring back the data down to the low level and to start strengthen and build the accountability. And also we need, at the end of the day, of course it's very it's top down, but bottom up approach, how to create this culture of accountability. And this will request for strengthening the system. And people will want to get more, there will be more appetite to get trained or to be part of those exercises.
Thanks a lot, Jan. So I think it makes the link maybe with Alpha, and indeed the school report cards and types of training and capacity building that is provided more at ground level and school level. And maybe
but I would like to add one thing that Alpha mentioned as well. I think also it's true that in many countries, AMIS is supported by donors. And without donors, the EMIS would collapse. So indeed, so it's the long-term engagement is very important to support those system. They are very costly. I think some people mentioned that. Indeed, they are super costly. The more we will go for digitalization of them, it means really for donors to sustain the support in order also to create the capacity. Creating capacity in a ministry will take years. So we have also to move away from the 3-year project approach to something that is long-term, 10 years, 15 years approach. And also, I know that the Gambia, you have also a kind of staff training strategy, national strategy. We need also to go and support countries in developing those strategies if they don't have them, in order to integrate those capacity building efforts in a comprehensive way and with a long-term vision. Otherwise, it's just kind of what I call, a band-aid approach. And at the end of the day, it will not sustain over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. So maybe Alpha, both on the kind of capacity building that is provided at school level, maybe with concrete examples of how did it make or not a change in terms of school management and having good examples and illustrations for that. And maybe on the second point also just raised by Diane in terms of long-term perspective and long-term visions related to data collections, but also use. Over to you, Alpha.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Dan, you are very right. The school report card is a very good avenue to really help cascade the data utilization from the planning directorate and the senior management of the ministry down to the schools and to the parents. Traditionally, EMIS data or the data we collect is only meant for the planning director to develop policies and inform strategies, and then yet the rest of the actors are not using it. But with the school report card, we are able to now have it to even for the people who cannot read and are not literate in their own local language, because it's presented at the school level in a language that the PTA agrees, so that they can hear. That's why it's been represented in terms of that icon or graphic form. But one thing that is the reform for that also, because the school report card has been there since 2009. And with the emphasis on foundational learning and school management, now the school report card also need to go down to try to address school-specific information, so that it's not just based on the annual assessment of the children, but also all.
Sorry, Alpha, I think you've been cut.
Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
No, I had my backup. Okay, so like I was saying, the school report card also need to be reformed to ensure that now that it can address it can address the sorry. Sorry, my apologies. The internet just.
No, that's okay. We can see. Can hear you now.
The biggest challenge is culture of data use in the education sector. Even beyond the school, the planning unit, other directors are using the data. They still ask us at the EMIS, how many schools do you have? What is the GR? And the school, we present the data every May in our statistical yearbook. We send it in the website, publish it for everybody. But yet people will come and ask us basic things. The culture of data use is really a challenge. So when we are building systems and collecting data systems, we need to ensure that, like the way we are trying to build capacity, the use of data need to be something very prominent. That's one of the challenges we have. Not many people are using the data. There is a high proportion of us just spending to respond data to users. And some of the people, you cannot just tell them, go to the website or go to the yearbook. You have to respond. But then the school report card is a very good medium for that, and particularly for targeting the local actors and ensuring that they participate in the school management, because they will now engage the school leadership at the local level. They will engage the regional offices, and they will engage eventually overall government actors. So we need to make sure that is really strengthened. Coming back to the capacity building, yes, you are right. And I think we really need to continue advocating when we have development partners are the people who are really sourcing funding for all the technology, for all the infrastructure, for all these tools, for everything almost. But then that should not be based on the Justice project. While that is done, there has to be some other capacity in terms of building capacity beyond just training some Excel or how to use a computer or how to design a questionnaire. Now, there was one thing that the IIP or UNESCO did during the sector management. There was a sector management program that we did in the Gambia during, I think it was called the Dakar or University of St. and University of Gambia that was started. That was very good. Recently, with the support of the GP and other partners in the Gambia, we are beginning to have an image master's course. We are linking University of the Gambia and University of Oslo through the HIS approach so that we can now build master's program on EMIS as a beginning. And that has started in the Gambia now. We had over 25 students in the ministry who are doing this master's program. We design a course, and then all these people are working in various areas, like in the EMIS, in planning, in HR, in assessment, in M&E. And they are now doing this course with University of Oslo, and they will be graduating with masters, and they are at home. And their dissertation will be around HR database, EMIS databases, things that they are working around, so that hopefully we'll have that macro at the macro level, people who are at the high level working on that. And the plan is to ensure that the university can provide other courses in terms of short-term courses in that. That we thought hopefully will change the rhythm, because right now English people are competing with the private sector. If you have a good statistician, you cannot keep it because the private sector will take it because the salary are higher. But then if you have a handful of them being produced locally or in a university around Africa, like just like UNESCO had done with this, the other course I mentioned earlier, and we are trying to do with the University of Oslo approach, we will be able to have a handful of people around. So this is one of the things I thought also partners should also make sure you when you give money to education, make sure you could say 1% of it will go to a data system, so that at least there is something ring-fenced for the budget of image system. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Alpha. So now we're going to pick up a few questions from the floor. In fact, there are many of them. Some of them are very specific and in particular related to PISA, to the number of countries participating in PISA, different things around that, around also some definitions related to the sector analysis versus situational analysis and so on. But I suggest that in sake of time, that we focus on those especially related to the use of those data to inform policy and evidence, which is really the core of our discussion. And so in a totally discretionary way, I have selected 3 questions from the floor, from familiar names, I must say. The first one from Desmond Birmingham, telling us that he has been the chair of the GP Independent Technical Advisory Board, and that this board has seen education sector analysis and plans from a wide range of countries, that they notice a fairly consistent pattern of countries collecting extensive data and evidence, but not necessarily using them effectively to inform strategy development and implementations. And so do you, the speakers, have any good ideas or examples of best practice to address this challenge? Just taking one example. In particular, have panelists seen any promising examples of simple data visualization tools to make data and evidence more accessible and useful to policymakers and planners? And another questions come to our former colleagues, Varghese, who is asking, can we ask you how did planning process change as the results really of the availability of this abundance of data that you have been presenting? And the last question is our colleague from NIEPA, Bisval, saying, putting in place a policy for data productions, management and utilization. At the end of the day, whatever data and evidence are available, they do not find their way to policy and program planning. And so the question is, what is the political economy of evidence use in policy and program planning in developing countries? What is the way out to enable developing countries to lead from within placing robust system of information and management? So a lot of convergence in those 3 questions. So maybe we can start with you, Somaya, with all 3.
Yes, I'll try to answer some of the questions that were asked, and maybe on the availability of data and lack of use or like limited use, or the paradox of that. What we observe is, I think I mentioned that earlier, is really kind of this, we need to move away from this vision of linear, from data production to data use. What we observe is actually this does not work. And it does not work because it does not take into account that data should answer a policy question or a policy demand. And so if you're not building that demand from the get-go, you will never create that loop where it's reinforcing each other, where basically the policy is informed by the data and the data collection is informed by the policy question. So creating kind of that loop is very important, and it's something that does not happen for one specific data source. It's not once you participate in PISA or when you're trying to build your EMIS and you do that, you need to do it in a comprehensive manner. And that is an intentional design that needs to be put in place. So I think I gave the example earlier. It's not when you need the answer from your data when you're doing your situation analysis or your education sector analysis, that the magic answer from the data will appear. That is need to have been planned well in advance, and so that kind of ecosystem is important. The second answer I want to give is also going away from a linear view where you have the data producers and the data users, and that often those roles are limited to ministries of educations or government officials. Often what we see is basically what you need is a community of practice. You need to create a culture of evidence use. And that could be by making sure that within your, you have research centers, that you have in academia people that are looking at different data, that are looking at like different policy questions and that are current or in questioned by the ministry, that the ministry is commissioning also outside of itself. And that is very important for sustainability, because one of the key challenges that we see is that the issue is often you have very few people. And that you're creating an issue where you have very few people within a very specific department of your ministry that have the capacity or knowledge or will to look at the data. And so you're not creating that institutional capacity over time. And so really making sure that you're building that broadly. And that also involved the schools, and that was mentioned earlier. So that is also important. And then again, I think the third issue around mobilizing data, making sure that data is mobilized for policy and evidence, is around the quality assurance of your data collections. And that's also important, because if you can have as much data as you have, but if people don't trust the data, they have no incentive of using it. And that's the case for the schools, and that's also the case when you're doing your strategic planning. So I think I'll stop here, but happy to pick up on more.
Thanks a lot, Soumaya. Diane, do you want to react on this one?
Could you just repeat those three questions? Sorry, I think I dropped them around the Soumaya's intervention. So they were the issue of.
You can react to what Soumaya has just said rather than getting back to the question.
So, okay. Okay. So I fully agree with what Soumaya said. I think she really portrayed the key issues. Maybe I can indeed. I think having in mind what we need to analyze, what we need to monitor is really important. Otherwise, indeed, there is this tons of data that are being produced, and the one that we need are not even produced. So I think it's also sometimes we see when we want to redesign questionnaires, there is this tendency of EMIS questionnaire to really stick on what they used to do, like routinely. But I think that as we move towards creating this accountability mechanism where you need to report on key performance indicator for your plan, you show result. You discuss report card at community level. you will see that you will narrow down to certain key critical indicators that ultimately the government will need to refer to or to respond to. And I've seen some interesting improvement in the way, for instance, school census report have been produced and conducted. Initially, you would see there were like 300 pages, just raw data, number of students in this school, number of teachers, which are useless for us. We don't need that. And we have seen some countries moving toward very analytical product. Evolution of GR, evolution of parity index, evolution of transition, evolution of national examination. These are more interesting also for the policymakers and for everyone in looking at the evolution of the system. So we are seeing positive trends, but I think the fact that that also donors kind of support countries based on sometimes the achievement of certain targets. In certain cases, some funding have been dispersed based on benchmark reach. This allows also to somehow focus on more key information that is needed to drive the sector, but as well to drive the support from donors. And again, I think that the more we will raise accountability, creating this culture of monitoring, of, also from the bottom to the up, also from maybe the civil society requesting, okay, how is this money being used, for what results? I think this will really help in moving away from those bunch of data that have been collected and useless to really the critical one that needs to advance the education agenda. So for that, I'm really in favor. I mean, I fully agree with that. And I think it would be the way forward to how we can also promote and push for strengthening this accountability mechanism, and it will trickle down to the improvement of data collection, the quality and the relevance of those data. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diane. Alpha, do you want to react on this link with accountability issues and possibly linking it to the role of civil society? Over to you, Alpha.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what you just said earlier.
Just to comment on what Diane was saying, that you need to make the link with accountability issues to really make sure that there is some kind of use of the information and data that is produced and that they are used, and possibly as part of this framework, not only consider the usual players we have been talking about, but also maybe other stakeholders such as civil society organizations.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is image data in Africa or in the Gambia now is a bit different from 5-10 years ago. A lot of things has changed. There has been some accountability demand from the public. The population is more aware, is more taking people to actors. There is always people demanding for more, and people are more polarized now. So because of that, everybody is now put in asked to respond. In fact, there have been new policy. There is a new Information Act in the Gambia. There has been so many policies that have been enabling and empowering the public now, including civil society. So everybody need to really respond to the public. And another thing that happened also, the shift from aggregate data to individual learner data for measuring learning. That also demands that, for example, in the Gambia, we used to have, let's say, about 1,000 schools. So that means 1,000 public schools, 1,000 questionnaire, a questionnaire of 4 pages. But now, we used to make that was our annual collection of data, whereby we collect 1,000 forms, report it throughout the year. But now we are now asked to collect 800,000 forms. Every child questioning it. So look at the challenge. So are we going to sit in Banjul in the headquarters trying to do that? No, we need to see how best the school can play a role, the community can play a role. There is a lot of other things now. Now, a school that have 200 children can now enroll maybe 60 children for class 1. The enrollment for grade 1, individual form, that should be done at the school level. It's not realistic anymore for Gambia for somebody to come from Banjul all the way to the school and try to enroll a 60 student and then go back to Banjul and report it. So we are saying, how do you empower the school management committee, that includes the teachers, the parents, and the community, leveraging on their existing tools and resources and capacity so that they can do it as part of their process, so that then EMIS people now will be harvesting the data. And similarly, how do you know them? You have to make sure that they see them, they see themselves in it. If you have to ask a school to collect and process their individual data, including assessment data, and it's for you at the head office, then they will not do it. But you have to build in some other incentive, including attendance data report, like dashboard, some kind of report that saves them time, some kind of analysis. So these are some of the things that we are now faced with. How do we encourage and motivate a school level system that ensure that it serves the school first, so that the school can present a report on teacher attendance, student attendance, and ensure that they can respond to the parents and the community, that when the school is able to cater for themselves in terms of its data, we at the head office and policy level can now come and harvest as a byproduct of that data process. With WhatsApp, with digital tools, with smartphones, because in the Gambia, the smartphone penetration is very high. Everybody has smartphone. What can we do with that? These are the kind of things that we are now thinking. So it's no more realistic for us to sit in Banjul and then keep doing that, because our system has changed. So how do you build capacity in the value chain? But first, incentive for at each level. If the school and the community cannot see their school report card on time, they cannot ensure that they can monitor school improvement grant on time at their own corner, they will not respect any data we ask them. But the moment they start seeing that this is time saving, we now have an Excel enrollment that is giving me the number of children from a fingertip. We are able to see a dashboard that is telling us these are the number of children that are present and absent. And they can save their administrative process and focus more on teaching and learning. Then the school will definitely, if something fails, they will call me in Banjul and say, Alpha, can you change my SIM card? Because I have not been able to report on attendance for my own community. But if it is only for me in Banjul, I will return there after 1 month. They will say, oh, the SIM card didn't work. You didn't do anything about it. You didn't even tell me, because there was no incentive. So these are some of the things we are grappling with right now, and then seeing how best we can do that. But the whole thing has changed. And again, Gambia is not like before. Now we are beginning to have people who are coming with a degree in the system, like in the education. They come with their laptop, they come with their training. So things have changed a little bit. Then how do you encourage those people to stay? It's not about their training, because like me, I had to wait many years to get my degree. But now I'm beginning to see people knocking on my door and saying, I've already got my master's and I want to work in EMIS. These are the new generation of people. So that kind of person, how do I monitor him? I have to be very careful. He drives his car, he comes with his laptop, he got his community degree, he doesn't depend on government for this anymore. So these are some of the things that have changed. So we are now grappling with a new challenge of EMIS at many levels, and the demand for data is now report more often, report everywhere, allow everybody to do their own corner. This is the new thing, and now we are beginning to ask to report on national language. How do we no, there are certain things that are happening in the education landscape. We really need to continue this conversation and see how best we can work with partners to ensure that our EMIS system can respond to the needs. But it's just very, very scary at this moment. But slowly, we'll get there.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for ending on this optimistic note, Alpha, and also raising all of those new and recent challenges, including those related to digitalizations, importance also of involving the youth and the new perspective related to that, about the political economy on the use of data, the accountability loop, and also the long-term vision that Diane has been referring to. So, of course, that's an ongoing discussion, and that, in fact, that we're going to pursue through this learning series of webinars. And so our last speaker will be our colleague GC from UNESCO headquarters, who is going to give you a bit more information on the next events that we are going to organize to pursue this exchange all together. So over to you, GC.
Thank you. Hello.
There is an echo. I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that this is fine now.
Now it is okay.
I think. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was a great session, learning about different experience from different experiences. I personally learned a lot, but there are still challenges. And since this is one, as Martin Vides, director of IIP, said in the opening, this session has been part of the IIP's strategic debate, but also combined with what UNESCO together with the partners have been kind of advancing. So I'd like to make a quick presentation about the background of this debates and learning series, and also to invite you to save the date. So, okay, so first of all, I hope that all of us, many of you know that there is a kind of a high-level steering committee for SDG 4 Education 2030 Agenda, which is kind of apex body for coordination, international coordination or global coordination when it comes to working together towards achieving SDG 4. So this committee, first of all, is very much a structured kind of body, which is comprised of member states. You can see on the left side of this slide, the composition of different constituencies coming together to form this steering committee. And there are also some member states representatives and the representatives of regional organizations and multilateral organizations. And also different stakeholders like private sector, youth representative, teacher organization, donor representative, and civil society organization. So under this high-level steering committee, there are three functional areas where international organizations as well as countries work together to promote effective and efficient cooperation and harmonization actions at global and regional level around the three areas. You can see there on the right side of the slide, the first functional area is about evidence-based policy formulation and planning and implementation, within which this discussion, today's session took place. And then the second one is more about data and monitoring in the education sector. And this functional area is more coordinated by UIS, UNESCO Institute for Statistics, as well as Global Education Monitoring Report team. And then functional area 3 is more on financing, which the functional area, this functional area 3 is more led by World Bank and also global partnerships, partnership for education secretariat. So now zooming into the functional area 1, as you can see here, the overall objective is to strengthen the institutional capacities of education authorities to use data and evidence for policy formulation, planning, and implementation. So you can see how what we discussed today fits into this broad objective. Actually, we have been discussing about also what kind of evidence that we are talking about. Is the data translate simply easily into evidence? Is evidence, there can be evidence, but how this evidence can really inform policy and practice? These are all the questions that we have been asking also in the context of developing this learning series. And also when we talk about education, is education simply schooling as we used to conceive it in the past? Or understand that now learning is taking place not only in school, but also outside of school walls. I think this is what the panelists have been kind of saying. And then also, I think Alpha mentioned that also the impact effect of COVID-19, which taught us that AMI system that is based on annual census administrative data collection is something that is relevant, or we need something more than that, which is real time, which is also eventually supporting teaching and learning practices in the classroom. So all these reflections are now taking into consideration. There are some specific objectives that we defined internationally, as you can see. Capacity building for local actors, and also promoting regional cooperation, and also leading to producing some global public goods that can be used and leveraged by different stakeholders for adapting and making them relevant to their context. Now, specifically on that functional area 1, as you can see, is there are two technical leads, UNESCO and OECD. UNESCO comprised of our section and the IIP, together with the Sherpas, represented by Latvia and Jakobs Foundation. And there are different members of committee of functional area that you can see there. I'm not going to list all of them. They are also, we also would like to work more with the Secretariat of Regional SDG 4 coordination mechanisms. So now, going now specifically into the learning series. Today's session is on the second IIP strategic debate, while at the same time, it is the first of the learning series that we are organizing under the functional area 1 on evidence, on using evidence to transform education policy. As you can see, the objectives, we are aiming to have 8 sessions. Each session is linked to different phases, to each of the stages of the policy cycle, as you can see on the right side. Starting with the function, situational evidence for sector analysis, and also for policy formulation, for policy adoption and planning, and also implementation monitoring. So we are aiming to organize a learning series for each of these planning cycle stages. Today was focused, as about the evidence for education sector analysis. And so we are aiming to organize a few other series this year, as you can see there. So please save the date, the 27th of September, around this time. We are going to have the session number 2 of the learning series, which is going to be focused on policy planning. Once evidence is built, and when policy is formulated, now you have to unpack this policy to make planning, and you can see there different areas that we are going to discuss. And also some focus would be put on resource projection, which is a tool also to assess the feasibility of the policy from the technical and financial and the social political perspective. So this is going to be in collaboration with the IIP's strategic debate, which is the second one, but I hope that it's going to be so, but it is going to be the second learning session of the learning series. Now, 1 month later, we are going to have another one, 30th of October, which is going to be focusing more on Africa, but from the lens of monitoring. And this is going to be in collaboration with UNESCO Multi-Sectoral Regional Office for West Africa, UNESCO Dakar office, to look into the first continental report, which focused on equity and inclusion, and also to take stock, to also discuss about what we are going to do for the second continental report on CESA, which is going to focus on learning and skills. So I have to go because I know that we are behind the schedule. The last one is going to be on the 14th of November. As you can see, it's going to be the session 4, which is going to be in collaboration with the OECD. I think some of the aspects were already mentioned by Sumaya, the importance of the institutional and human capacities that are required in order to really support the integration of research into policy development process. So this is going to be another one for this year. And we really look forward to meeting you once again. And today's session was very successful. I realized that at a certain point, it was the maximum 500 was already achieved. And I don't know if there is a possibility to allow more people to come. So thank you very much once again. So happy, hoping to see you once again. Over to you, Muriel or Martin.
Martin, do you want to say a last word?
Yeah, Muriel, you please.
Okay, so colleagues, so I think you've seen the dates. So please keep posted, and so we will get back to you with more information about the next sessions, and hope to see you as many as you were today. Indeed, we reached our cap of 500 plus today, so we need to find a way to allow more people to come. But we will circulate the PowerPoints and also the recording. Okay, to you, Martin. Yeah.
Okay, Muriel. Thank you very much. Very interesting session. Very good questions. I hope that we are going to be able to save also those questions. There's a lot of material there. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for the presenters and all the people that attended this strategic seminar.
Thank you, colleagues. Thanks to our speakers. Have a nice summer. See you in September.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.